Hi, welcome to Intermediate Chinese Reading, a free lesson. And today's lesson comes from this book, Chinese Language and Culture, a difficult but not impossible book to get hold of. So, according to Amazon, it was published in 2006. I think it was initially published earlier, and this is not the first edition. And today's chapter is on the subject of myth. Chinese myths and legends. So myth in Chinese is, of course, 神话, and legend is 传说. And it's a really great book. So from chapter 17, page 309. So first of all, we'll just have a brief overview of the chapter, and then we'll read it paragraph by paragraph and answer questions. And for particularly unusual words, there is a glossary on the following page. So your vocabulary gets bigger the further you go through this book. These are sample sentences. So so in each chapter there are new grammar points. So 语法 grammar points. So here, 明明, it is obvious that. 明明, it is obvious that. And I think in modern Chinese it's much more common not to say 明明, but 明显, 明显. So the second character is 显, X-I-A-N. So 明显. So an example of a sentence using 明明 or 明显. 人们明明知道这些故事是编造出来的. So people undoubtedly know that these are made up stories. So in this context, 明明 or 明显 means undoubtedly. 可是大家还是喜欢讲，喜欢听. But everyone still likes to tell them and listen to them. That is a definition of a myth or legend. So we'll go through these various grammar points later. And also we will, so this is filling the gaps using sentences that contain these grammar points. This exercise. And this is a 造句, 造句, create a sentence using these grammar points. So for example, 宁可也, 宁可也. So rather something something than something something. So in the book, one example they give of the use of 宁可也 is 宁可死也不跟你结婚. It's a bit harsh. I would rather die than marry you. But that's an example sentence they give. This next exercise is translating these sentences into Chinese. And if you have any experience of translation, you'll know that translating out of your native language is much, much more difficult than translating into your native language. So pretty much every professional written translation job is done by someone translating into their own language and out of another. This is the first exercise we'll actually do, exercise number 5, which is simply answering questions based on the text. 什么是神话故事? What is a mythical story? And following exercises, exercise 6, are our discussion questions. So for example, 为什么人们都喜欢神话故事? Why do people like myths, mythical stories? So in other words, why are myths popular? And the last one, which is something for pupils to do in their own time, is 小作文, just a small thesis. 简单的写一个你知道的神话故事. Write a mythical story or legend that you know. So first, we will take these questions in exercise 5 one at a time. There are 4 in total, and we'll read through the text and answer them as we go along. 中国有许多神话故事 这些故事都是人们根据自己的想象编造出来的。例如我们前面学过的牛郎织女的故事。China has a great many mythical stories. 这些故事 these stories 都是人们根据自己的想象编造出来的 are, of course, created by people's imaginations. 例如 for example 我们前面学过的牛郎织女的故事 so for example the story of 牛郎 and 织女 so in a previous chapter of the book it tells the mythical story behind Chinese Valentine's Day so that is 牛郎跟织女 we won't have time to go into all that now but it's a very famous mythical story and it's where Chinese Valentine's Day derives, the 7th day of the 7th month of the Chinese calendar, so not our calendar. So, 神话故事里面的人物在现实生活中是绝对没有的。故事里面的事情在现实生活中也是根本不可能发生的。So, the characters in mythical stories, 人物在现实生活中 in real life 是绝对没有的 absolutely don't exist 故事里面的事情 so the things that happen in the stories 在现实生活中也是根本不可能发生的 are not things that could possibly happen in everyday life 也不知道为什么人们明明 so remember 明明 means obviously or I prefer it because in modern spoken Chinese, people are much more likely to say 明显. So I'll just insert that here. 明显人们明明知道这些故事是编造出来的，可是大家都还是喜欢讲，喜欢听。So 也不知道为什么 don't know why 人们明明知道 people obviously know 这些故事是编造出来的 these stories are made up 可是大家都还是喜欢讲喜欢听 however everyone likes to tell them and everyone likes to hear them we'll complete the first paragraph before answering the first question I mean the third paragraph before answering the first question 神话故事流传了千百年了 so these mythical stories have been around for millennia and centuries 千百年来人们一代又一代的重复着这些古老的故事 so over the millennia people generation after generation 一代又一代的重复着 repeated 这些古老的故事 these ancient stories so an example from the West would be Romulus and Remus or even Robin Hood 人们讲的最多的大家最熟悉的 so the ones that are most spoken everyone is familiar with 除了牛郎织女的故事以外 so except for the story of 牛郎跟织女就是愚公移山的故事了 so 愚公移山 so if you're not familiar with Chinese myths this will certainly be a new word for you 愚公移山 so which is many of these words are already in the glossary so the story of the man who moved the mountain let's look down here for the official translation of it 愚公移山 the foolish old man who moved mountains well that's we're 3 paragraphs in so now let's try to answer the first question in exercise 5什么是神话故事什么是神话故事 so what is a myth there's plenty to choose from in these first 3 paragraphs looks like 人们 根据自己的想象编造出来的。So this is part of the story. 例如牛郎织女 for example 牛郎织女。神话故事里面的人物在现实生活中是绝对没有的，故事里面的事情在现实生活中也是根本不可能发生的。This is we'll try to keep it concise in our answer. So we'll start off with 根据自己的想象编造出来的 made up from their own imagination. So 编造 is a pretty is not a very common word that intermediate readers would necessarily know. So just put the pinyin in here, just created from their imaginations. 人们根据自己的想象编造出来的。人们根据自己的想象编造出来的故事。So, story people have made up from their imaginations. And for a second part, I would add from paragraph 3, 神话故事流传了千百年了。So, 千百年来，人们一代又一代的重复着这些古老的故事。So, I would just put in the second paragraph, the second sentence of paragraph 3 would be a satisfactory way of completing this answer. 千百年来，一代又一代，重复 so repeat 重复这些古老的故事。And so on. 人们根据自己的想象编造出来的故事，千百年来，人们一代又一代的重复这些古老的故事。So, question 2. So we're using the lower writing system here. So, 为什么说这些故事是编出来的？ So why say that these stories are made up? So, well, again, the answer to this is kind of in paragraph 2. So, 神话故事里面的人物在现实生活中是绝对没有的。So we'll start there. 里面的事情在现实生活中也是根本不可能发生的。So the people absolutely never existed, and the things certainly couldn't happen in real life. So we got our answer to question 2. 里面的人物在现实生活中是绝对没有的。里面的事情在现实生活中也是根本不可能发生的。里面的事情在现实生活中也是根本不可能 That's our answer to number 2. 里面的人物在现实生活中是绝对没有的，里面的事情在现实生活中也是根本不可能发生的。So let's look at question 3. 愚公的故事说的是什么？ So the story of Yu Gong, the foolish old man, who we've just kind of heard about. We've heard him mentioned at the bottom of paragraph 3, so let's find out who he is. Excuse all the scrolling. The foolish old man who moved a mountain. So, Yu Gong Yishan, 愚公移山是说一个叫愚公的老人。So the foolish old man who moved the mountain is about an old man called Yu Gong. 他带领着儿子，带领着儿孙们，要把挡在家门口的两座大山搬走。He took his children and grandchildren to try to move the mountain next to their home. He took his children and grandchildren to try to move the mountain next to his home. Yu Gong家的隔壁住着一位寡妇，她每天都带着孩子来帮忙。So next door to Yu Gong's home, 隔壁 meaning next door, there lived a 寡妇, so a widow, 寡妇。她每天都带着孩子来帮忙。She also brought her children every day, 每天都带, to try to help. 愚公的对门住着一个叫智叟的老人。So opposite Yu Gong lived an old man named 智叟. So a word for a wise old man. 他不但不来帮忙, not only did he not come and help, 反而笑话愚公说, also laughed at Yu Gong, saying, 你真是老糊涂啦，你都快90岁了，碰你们这几个人怎么能够搬得走这两座大山呢？ You really are so hutu. Probably the clearest translation of the word hutu is probably confused, but it's open to discussion. So you're really a confused old man, or you're really an old fool. 你都快90岁了, you're almost 90. You're almost 90. 碰你们这几个人怎么能够? So how can you few people 搬得走这两座大山呢? Move these 2 entire mountains. 我宁可一辈子不出门，也不做这种傻事。So remember earlier on we met the grammar point 宁可什么什么也不. So rather something something than something something. So the old man says, the wise old man says to Yu Gong, the protagonist, I would rather never come out, 一辈子不出门，也不做这种傻事, than take part in this stupid activity, 傻事. So 傻 as in stupid, 傻子 is idiot, 傻瓜 is silly fool, 傻事 is stupid thing. So to answer question 3, who is Yu Gong? Who is Yu Gong? And what is his story saying? So we don't have to copy the entirety of that paragraph 4. So I would just say Yu Gong 他是一个老人. He's an old person. 他带着 his 儿孙们, his children and grandchildren, 要把家门口两座山搬走。So he is an old man. 他是一个老人，他带着儿孙们要把家门口的两座山搬走。And he takes his children and grandchildren to try to move the mountain next to his house. So this is a satisfactory answer to the question. 狱中的故事说的是什么？ So what is 狱中? So maybe add a little bit. 隔壁的寡妇 the widow next door. 帮他 the widow next door helps him. Then 可是 but 只手 the wise old man 不帮他 does not help him. So question 4. 听了古老的神话故事可以让人们感受到什么? So hearing ancient myths, what can it make people feel? We'll read the final 4 paragraphs and try to answer that question. 愚公回答说 So Yu Gong replied to say, 你才是老糊涂啦 So you're the one who's a confused old man. 你呀越来越笨 You're getting stupider and stupider. 笨的连那小孩子都不如 Even stupider than those children. So there's a couple of there's these expressions 才越来越 and 不如 are all grammar points that are central to this chapter. So we'll work on them a bit further later on. So 才 is emphasizing a point. You're the one who's a confused old man. So the 才 here is like saying, no, you're crying, or you're the one who's being unreasonable, that kind of thing. 越来越老越笨 You're more this, more that. The more you, then the more you. So for example, when I was in the middle of winter in China one time, I was at an outdoor swimming pool and I was just umming and erring about whether to jump in. And the guy shouted across the pool, said, 你越等越冷 The longer you wait, the colder you'll get. 你越等越冷 So in this context, 你越老越笨 The older you get, the stupider you become. And 不如 means even, not as something. So 笨的连那小孩子都不如 So not even as smart as that child, that small child. So 你想想 You think 我年纪虽然很大了 Even though my age is considerable 可是我还有儿子有孙子 I have children, I have sons, I have grandsons 子子孙孙是无穷尽的 So my descendants will be infinite. 这两座山虽然很高 Even though these mountains are tall 但它却不会再增高了 They're not going to get any taller. 只要我们不停地挖下去为什么会搬不走呢 As long as we just keep digging, why would we be unable to move them? 这件事被上帝知道了 God knows this, so 上帝 meaning God. So 上帝被愚公的精神感动了 God is moved as in emotionally moved, touched by 愚公's spirit 精神 spirit。于是他就派了2个大力士把2座大山背走了。So 大力士, this is another word I had to look up. It's in the glossary on the following page. So big strong men. So thereafter, God sends 2 big strong men down to the mountains to help Yugong move them. 人们喜欢神话故事，是因为人们在故事里面寄托着自己的希望。So people like mythical stories because they see their own hopes in them. So 寄托 is to place, as in to place your hope. So 希望 meaning hope in them. So people can see themselves in these characters and their trials and tribulations. 有的人希望自己能像故事里的人物那样聪明、勇敢，做出一些惊天动地的大事情。So some people hope that they may someday be as clever, brave, or as audacious as the characters in these myths, just the way many of us wish that we could be Robin Hood or characters from Greek myth, or most characters in movies today. Like most men probably secretly want to be James Bond sometimes. That's why these kinds of stories are so popular. 有的人希望自己能像故事里说的那样，和自己心爱的人在一起幸福的生活。So, some people hope that they may be like in those stories and live happily ever after with the ones they most love. So, 自己心爱的人在一起幸福的生活. It's probably as good of a translation as you're going to get of the English expression happily ever after. 在日常生活中, so in everyday life, 人们总是会遇到这样那样的困难. People will encounter all kinds of troubles. 而这些古老的神话故事, but these ancient myths 可以让人们在和困难做斗争的时候, these ancient myths can help us battle with our own issues, 感受到一股力量 and feel and draw strength from these stories, 感受到一个希望 and receive hope, 感受到一份信心 and increase our confidence. So if you feel these few paragraphs are a bit above your level, there's a very good glossary on the following page. I did have to breathe through it beforehand because words like, well, ming is kind of an old-fashioned word anyway, but I hadn't heard this myth before, Yu Gong Yi Shan, before I read this book. Ge Bi is very common in spoken Chinese, doesn't actually come up that much in written Chinese. Zhi So, a wise old man in ancient myth. Well, he turns out not to be that wise in this story. Wu Qiong Jin. Again, this is more lyrical Chinese than actual everyday spoken Chinese, but it's good to know. Shang Di, God. Of course, modern day China is officially an atheist state, so people don't necessarily talk about God that much. Jin Tian Dong Di. 4-character expression. There's an entire chapter in the book on these types of 4-character expressions. Ding Tian Dong Di is world shaking. And so, but anyway, let's answer us the final question before breezing over some of the grammar points. So, question 4. 听了古老的神话故事，可以让人们感受到什么? What can listening to myths help people feel? So this, I think, is answered in the last couple of lines of the last paragraph. So 这些古老神话故事，古老神话故事，可以让人们在困难斗争 so when battling their own problems 的时候感受到 so feel 一股力量 so some strength 感受到一个希望 feel a bit of hope and 感受到一份信心感受到一份信心 so they give people hope, strength, and confidence as just as because and this particular story has a moral. It's about persistence and how God rewards his the old man's so persistence in trying to move the two mountains. So this is one of the more advanced chapters in the book. It's chapter 17, and the book it's in the second half. How many chapters does the book go to? It goes up to 22 chapters. So this is one of the more difficult ones. So the grammar points that we came up, let's go over some of them and try to create sentences. So 宁可也 rather something something 也 so in the text the wise old man who turns out not to be that wise says 我宁可 I'd rather 一辈子不出门 never go out in my entire life 也不做这种傻事 than do something so foolish. I've already created a sentence here 我宁可死也不跟你结婚 I'd rather die than marry you, which is also found in another part of the book. Long story. 越什么越 So in the text, Yu Gong says to Zhi So, 越老越笨 The older you get, the stupider you become. So here I would put, well, let's make a sentence with 越什么什么越我越了解你 The more I understand you 越喜欢你 The more I like you 我越了解你越喜欢你 The more I understand you the more I like you 脸什么什么不如 So, well, let's look above and see what kind of examples we get with 脸不如 So in the text you have 你笨的脸那个小孩子都不如 You're even more foolish than that child. That comes directly from the text. 我的中文水平连小学生都不如 The level of my Chinese is even lower than that of an elementary school student. 赵小燕不如王小凤漂亮漂亮 So 不如 So how about Manchester United? So 今年曼联队 with apologies to non-football fans 今年曼联队 Manchester sorry 曼联队 is Manchester United 联阿森纳 不如 so are even. So this year, 今年曼联对 Manchester United 连Arsenal 不如 are even weaker than Arsenal. So it looks like well, who knows which one will finish lower in the league. I'd probably, just to be really technically better grammatically, probably add a do uru, so even worse than Arsenal. So not only not top 4, also barely even top 6. So the next grammar point is piang. So let's look for examples of how piang is used in both in the text and in the chapter. So piang is to depend upon or lean on. So 凭你们这几个人怎么能搬得走这两座大山呢？ So how can, with just you few people, how can these two mountains be moved away? Next one. 你凭什么说我拿了你的书? On what basis? 你 so 凭什么说? Do you say that I took your books? 我拿了你的书. Next. 电影院游乐场的门口都写着凭票入场. So movie theaters and amusement parks, 电影院游乐场 will say 凭票入场. Oh, so admission by ticket only. You can only get in with a ticket on the door. So你凭什么说? On what basis are you saying 你凭什么说你比我帅? You're better looking than me. So on what basis can you say you're better looking than me? 你凭什么说你比我帅? And last one, 明明. So again, in spoken Chinese nowadays, it's normally 明显, but we'll stick with 明明 for now. So in the text, 明明 is written, appears in the sentence that goes, so it's obvious that 人们明明知道这些故事是编造出来的. People obviously know that these stories are made up. 可是大家还是喜欢讲, 喜欢听. But everyone loves to speak them and hear them. 汤姆明明知道小燕有男朋友. So Tang Mu obviously knows Xiao Yan has a boyfriend. 可是还是要请小燕去看电影. But he's still going to invite her to the movies with him. Next, 你明明知道这个题的答案. You obviously know the answer to the question. 为什么不告诉我? Why don't you tell me? So let's make a sentence with 明明. How about 你们明明在偷听你明明喜欢她. You obviously like her. 你为什么不去跟她说话? Why don't you go and talk to her? So you obviously like her. Why don't you go and talk to her? 你明明喜欢她，你为什么不去跟她说话? Why don't you go and talk to her? So that's so all will complete together today. But just another brief overview of the rest of the chapter. 翻译, so translate. So translate this English into the Chinese, and in fact, the original Chinese is simply in the text anyway. So you're writing or you're transcribing what you've already read. These are the questions we've answered. 课堂讨论, so classroom discussion. We needed a good few of us for this exercise to be worthwhile. So 知守聪明还是愚公聪明? So who is smarter? 知守, the wise old man who's very skeptical, or 愚公, the old so-called fool who tries to move the two mountains. So who is smarter out of the two? So because obviously this is a matter of opinion. Some would say the wise old man, but then the fool is dedicating his whole life to something so audacious. Maybe he isn't all that smart. Number 2, 为什么人们都喜欢神话故事? So why do people like myths? Kind of question we kind of already have answered. And this would be, if this were a formal lesson, this would be the homework. 简单的写一个你知道的神话故事. So briefly write a mythical story that you know. So this is chapter 17 of the book. And if I may show you, and that's just the first part. Let me just pull it up. 相思树和相思鸟. 相思树和相思鸟. Bit of a tongue twister. 相思树和相思鸟. 中国有一句话叫做有情人终成眷属 sorry， 意思是说两个相爱的人最后一定会生活在一起的。So this is a myth about about more focusing on love stories, and the great thing is it reuses the grammar points from earlier in the chapter, so it really reinforces them, and also has the same types of comprehension questions and discussion questions. It really is a great book, so I strongly recommend, if you feel that this is the right level for you, getting a hold of this book and getting in touch.